Welcome to the Restored Lands Podcast, the official show for Restored Lands nonprofit. Restored Lands is an environmental organization based in Salida, Colorado, doing work in land stewardship, education, advocacy, and efforts that engage the community. Today we have a show that will explore a restoration project on Colorado's Gore Creek that is set to begin this fall 2026 in the Vail Valley. This river restoration project was sparked by a toxic chemical spill caused at Vail Resorts in September 2021. We'll also discuss the work the Town of Vail is doing, not just to restore the Gore, but to be sustainable role models for other communities as well. Today we have a special guest on to talk about the efforts that have gone into repairing this watershed and where we are at today. With your host, Henry Passerini, and special guest, Town of Vail Watershed Specialist, Peter Wadden. All right, well, welcome, Pete. Thank you for joining me, man. I'm super stoked to have you on.
Yeah, my pleasure. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Well, I just kind of wanted to, well, first of all, I'm sorry I couldn't make it to Vail. My background's kind of the best I could do. This is actually on Vail Mountain in 2019, I want to say. So
I recognize it. That was a very different snow year, 2019.
Yeah, I bet you guys didn't have too many days quite like this, huh?
I don't know if I could say we had any this year.
Yeah, this year was a tough one. I actually just heard that the pine beetle is going to have a really good year this year because it's been so dry. Is that true?
Yeah, that's to be expected. It's definitely something we're concerned about. A lot of people don't realize that mountain pine beetle is a native insect, that
Hmm.
it's always been here. It co-evolved with our lodgepole pine forests, but it behaves much more like an invasive insect these days, partly because of the history of forestry and our trees all being kind of in the same age class without much diversity of ages. But really because winters are warmer and they have more successful breeding cycles.
Hmm. I just always thought when they said there's nothing we can do to stop them destroying the forest, is there really nothing we could do?
Um, I mean, it depends how big we're willing to go. If we could roll back some of the effects of climate change, we probably
Sure.
could slow it a little bit. And in the short term, no, but we can learn lessons about how to diversify the age class of our trees and our forests. Basically, because our forests were cleared all around the same time, 80 or 100 years ago, the trees that are standing in our forests now all started growing around the same time. So they're all reaching senescence at the same, roughly the same time period. Just like people getting old, their immune systems get weaker as they reach the end of their lives. And we have entire forests that are hitting that benchmark at the same time, making them more susceptible to the blue stain fungus that mountain pine beetle carries. And this actually relates to, I'm probably getting ahead of myself, but this relates to the problem we see with aquatic insect populations in Gore Creek. One of the unintended consequences of spraying trees on private property for mountain pine beetle is drift of those pesticides and impacts to non-target species, including beneficial insects in the creek.
Wow. Yeah, well, I didn't know that. So on land and in water, it's the climate has an effect, and these warm winters have an effect, and even the mitigation efforts have an effect.
Yeah, I mean we're performing a big experiment with our planet and our ecosystems, and it's maybe a little bit morbidly interesting to see what happens in some cases, but it's pretty scary too. I had my first encounter with a tick in Vail about 2 weeks ago, so middle of March. That's a
Wow.
little unusual. I'm seeing larkspur in bloom in Vail, which is a beautiful native wildflower, but we wouldn't expect that to bloom for 3 or 4 more weeks, if not more. I had my first mosquito bite of the season up here in March, so I think it's an unusual year, but years like this might become more common in the coming decades.
Very interesting. I look forward to kind of seeing how this plays out this year with the pine beetle and see if it just kind of see what happens. Well, let's start with a quick brief intro of who you are, what you do, what it means to be the watershed specialist at the Town of Vail, kind of the things you guys are doing, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Pete Wadden. I'm the Watershed Specialist with the Town of Vail Environmental Sustainability Department. Our department deals with everything sustainability related in Vail, from greenhouse gas emissions targets and waste diversion to the more ecosystem health and stewardship kind of stuff that I do. My position was originally created in response to some alarming results from aquatic invertebrate monitoring that we discovered a little over a decade ago. So beginning in, the late 2000s, about 2008 or 9, fly anglers, avid fly anglers in Vail started noticing and reporting to the town that they weren't seeing some of the fly hatches on Gore Creek that they were used to seeing. The mayfly and caddisfly hatches in particular just weren't happening. So they were concerned about how that might impact the fishing and the trout populations and just what that meant for the ecosystem. The town took them seriously and partnered with other entities like our water provider, Eagle River Water and Sanitation District, to undertake some more formal scientific monitoring of those bug populations, and discovered that what those fly anglers were seeing was absolutely true, that the most sensitive species of aquatic insects, the mayflies, stoneflies, and caddisflies, their populations were either greatly depressed or completely absent from Gore Creek. And the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, or CDPHE, sets standards under the Clean Water Act, both for what should be in a creek, like these bug populations, as well as what should not, pollutants like zinc and arsenic. So these annual monitoring routines that we undertook beginning in 2009 showed that Gore Creek was not meeting those state standards for aquatic life populations. And in 2012, CDPHE formally listed Gore Creek as a 303D impaired waterway for low aquatic life. And a lot of people, might say, who cares about some bugs? I'd rather have less bugs around the creek anyway. But these insects and other invertebrates are the foundation of the food chain for a lot of other species that we really value. The four species of trout that exist in Gore Creek being one important one, but also songbirds and bats and everything on up in the food chain along the creek ecosystem. And there's some kind of unintended consequences of this. Like I said, all the bugs are not gone from Gore Creek, just the most pollution sensitive ones. And many of those pollution sensitive bugs are predators that help control pests. So they have similar life cycles to things like mosquitoes that lay their eggs in the water. The larvae live underwater and then they emerge as adults to fly around and mate and start the cycle again. But the stoneflies and some of the caddisflies and some of the mayflies are predators of things like mosquito larvae. So we're seeing pretty annoying impacts for human beings too, that what used to help control bug mosquito populations is now taken out of that aquatic ecosystem. So the town took this pretty seriously, undertook a big study to figure out what the causes were, and by 2016 created my position. So I've been at this for about 10 years trying to address sources of pollution in Gore Creek and restore aquatic invertebrate populations.
I think that's neat that kind of around the time this became an impaired waterway is when they started this position, and you guys, like you said, started taking it more seriously and started doing more around it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a top priority for this community. It's really cool to see on some of our community surveys, it's pretty consistently the second top priority for survey respondents after affordable housing. And if you're familiar with how big of an issue housing is here in these mountain communities, being second to that places this pretty high in people's minds. So for me, it's really gratifying to be doing something I care about, and it's really cool to do it in a community that also values ecosystem stewardship as much as I do.
So that's awesome. I do before we get more into it, I do want to let people know, give the audience some background as to why Pete and I are meeting today. And that is because in 2021 there was a spill, a toxic chemical spill on Gore Creek. This was done by Vail Resorts. There was a snowmaking valve that was left open, and it ended up dumping altogether, from what I understand, around 2 million gallons of water into Gore Creek. It was tainted with algicide. And that was snowmaking water, so it was tainted with algicide, got into about a mile and a half of the creek, or that's what it damaged, at least about a mile and a half. And it killed over 100 fish. And yeah, that's from when that happened. The settlement from that, it was around, I think it was actually $275,000, but $249,000, I believe, is what was allocated towards this restoration. And with that settlement, that is what allowed this project to actually be taken seriously and be able to happen. Because, as you know, this was impaired since 2012, this waterway. So there are some other funders. You got the Town of Vail, you've got Colorado Parks and Wildlife, you got Eagle Valley Trout Unlimited. There might be one more, but so you've got some other stakeholders in this too. So yeah, once that happened, this is now we're at the point where there will be a $617,000 restoration project here this year, I believe, this September, this October. Is that right?
Yeah, we hope to start working the creek on August 1st and be done with the biggest, rock moving and things by the end of September.
Okay. So at the end of the day, with this spill has really allowed the restoration project to happen. So there is some good that is coming out of this, and we will be talking a little bit more about the restoration project itself and things like that. But what I'm most excited to talk about today is the advocacy and the outreach that has gone on from the Town of Vail, from Pete, as far, with the community, within the community, to try to get them understanding that this is an issue, and we need to, maybe act on it in a different way. So yeah, Pete, why don't I just kind of toss it over to you, and yeah, you can just talk about what that looked like, how the advocacy, what it even was, and how well it was received by the community.
Yeah, so that spill occurred about 5 years into my tenure in this position with Town of Vail. So I've been working really hard for half a decade on trying to restore the creek, and it was frustrating and kind of devastating to see the impacts of this. And as you said, it was an accidental discharge of about 300,000 gallons of water from a snowmaking pond that had been treated with something called Cutrine plus algicide to try to control algae in that pond. And one of the really crazy things about this is if you read the label of this algicide, it says it's meant for, this is the EPA label. This is a legal document, the label on a chemical, a landscaping chemical like that. It says it's meant for application to ponds, water bodies, and fish hatcheries. But if you go further down the label, the EPA environmental warning says this chemical is toxic to fish and aquatic invertebrates. So it's really kind of mind-blowing to me that this chemical is out there that is intended for direct application to waterways, but it's toxic to the things that live in those waterways. So yeah, this valve was accidentally left open on a weekend in September when there was a pretty big townwide event. The Vail Social was happening, so there were a lot of people out and about around town who all of a sudden were starting to see fish belly up in Gore Creek on a Friday night. I got the call about that, I think on Sunday, and got out to investigate it on Monday and again on Tuesday with aquatic biologists from Colorado Parks and Wildlife. Like you said, we found something like 120 dead fish. We also got an aquatic invertebrate specialist out there to do some sampling and documented some pretty devastating impacts to the aquatic invertebrate populations. The good news is, now 5 years later, those bug populations recover very quickly. They have short life cycles, and the trout populations have recovered very well too. We actually have an underwater camera on that stretch of creek that I'd encourage people to check out, the Gore Creek trout camera.
I remember them talking about that at the meeting.
Yeah,
Yeah, they've got that online.
yeah, and it is right now, especially, it is teeming with fish. So. But the good thing that came out of that, as you said, is this settlement between the state Natural Resource Defense Fund and Vail Resorts that allocated 249 some thousand dollars to go back to a project on Gore Creek. We partnered with Eagle Valley Trout Unlimited to write another grant and get another 200 grand from Colorado Parks and Wildlife Fishing as Fund grant. Uh, Trout Unlimited kicked in a really generous donation from their members of $67,000, and then the Town of Vail made a $100,000 contribution as well. So this is going to result in a, as you said, $617,000 in-stream habitat restoration on a section of creek near the Vail Nature Center that has really high potential but could use some work. So I'm pretty excited to we're getting down to the wire on permitting and planning and things like this, and it's just going to be a couple of months before we break ground on it. So it's going to be really, really cool to see this come to fruition after, a years long saga of getting to this point.
Totally. So in terms of outreach to the community, telling them, educating them or whatever it was, what did that look like? How did you guys do that exactly?
Yeah, so, at the time of the spill, there were reports in the local newspaper of record, the Vail Daily, about it. And that was really mostly how the community learned about it. I think they were frustrated and angry as I was. But as it's come around, I think people are excited to see something good coming out of this as well. And it was an opportunity. One of the other big this was an acute incident that occurred, but most of the problems that Gore Creek faces are more ongoing, pollution from stormwater runoff, from landscaping practices, from loss of riparian vegetation along the stream banks and things like that. So being able to talk about the impacts that an algicide can have or other landscaping chemicals can have on the creek kind of presented an opportunity and I think opened people's eyes. Regular property owners who might be fertilizing their lawns or spraying their trees with insecticide and may not have been quite as aware of the impacts that can have on beneficial insect species like the ones in the creek. This has presented an opportunity to say, this was a big banner event that everyone was aware of, but there's stuff going on around town every day that regular folks like you and I are responsible for and have control over that could be changed to the benefit of the creek.
Yeah, that's one thing that I think is interesting to know that a lot of people don't know is that the impairment of this creek is due largely to urbanization. It's not just, and you even said yourself at the meeting, like there is no legacy of mining here. So it's not from that. It's from, just the people being here. And I guess not really, being aware and mindful of how they are there.
Yeah, I mean it's a classic story in Colorado to see an impaired waterway resulting from, acid mine drainage or a legacy mine. But yeah, there's no history of mining in the Gore Creek watershed. That's not true of the larger Eagle River watershed, but where I work on Gore Creek, we don't have heavy industry or a history of mining to point to as the culprit for this impairment in Gore Creek. So we really have to consider how the development of our urban landscape over the last 60 years in Vail, including roadways and de-icers for those roadways in the winter, the ornamental and chemical intensive landscaping that has popped up around town, the presence of a major interstate, how all those things combine to contribute stressors to the creek ecosystem. And you just have to consider that a waterway or a river or a creek is more than just water in a channel. It's an ecosystem that's dependent on and interdependent with the vegetation around it. And waterways are inherently susceptible to pollution because of the nature of a watershed. And a watershed is an area of land that drains into a body of water. So you have to consider everything that happens on that body of water as snow melts or rain runs off. It's going to carry pollutants and water downstream into the river or stream or lake at the bottom of the watershed. So this is why it's so important to be aware of and careful about how we steward our waterways. They are inherently sinks for pollutants uh, because everything flows down into them.
Yeah, it sounds like a big part of it is stormwater runoff, pesticide runoff, a lot of just runoff into the waterway, which, I mean, that's something I think. I definitely think that there are things that can be done to mitigate that. But it's awareness. Like if people aren't aware of it, then what are they going to do? So, I think as unfortunate as the 2021 spill was, I think that there's a lot of good that comes out of this. And if anything, we should be in a much better place after this because of this.
Yeah, Gore Creek bug numbers have improved over the last decade, and education and outreach has been a huge part of that campaign because people really need to recognize that they have an impact on waterways, which means that they have the power to uh, take actions and make decisions that could benefit our waterways as well. And that can be how you manage your landscape, how you choose to drain your pools and hot tubs, right? Those should not go into rivers or even into storm drains that flow into rivers. So education has been a big part of the Restore the Gore initiative. But there's also a lot of structural stuff that the town is doing to treat stormwater runoff and capture the pollutants in the stormwater before they reach the creek, making changes to our own landscaping practices, replacing non-functional turf grass with more native vegetation that doesn't need as much water or as much fertilizer to thrive, eliminating the use of some of the most harmful insecticide applications, the foliar applied insecticides that are sprayed and coated over the outside of a tree. The biggest jump we saw in our aquatic invertebrate populations was after the town eliminated foliar pesticide applications in our own internal operations in 2016. We cannot regulate that for private property owners, but we still strongly encourage private property owners and property managers to consider less impactful ways of combating things like spruce bark beetle and mountain pine beetle and aphids that may impact their trees.
So I'm curious, why is that the town of Vail can't have a say to, these private landowners what to use?
Yeah, well, we can educate, we can encourage, but the in the state of Colorado, regulations over landscape chemicals are the purview of the state and the state alone. So the Pesticide Applicators Act that governs certification for pesticide applicators, what types of chemicals are registered, what types of chemicals can be used, and how they can be used, contains a preemption on local control within the law that says municipalities, local governments may not pass more stringent regulation than what exists at the state level.
Hmm. So more of the whole greater pesticide story, or this type of story would have to develop for any changes on that level to be made.
Yeah, something would have to change at the state level for, governments at the level of the town of Vail or Eagle County to be empowered to regulate landscape chemicals. So what we do right now is education and outreach and try to encourage people to be mindful of ecosystem impacts when they're making decisions about how they manage their landscape.
So well, it sounds like things are looking better, with this type of implementation by you guys.
Yeah, Gore Creek bug numbers have improved. They still do not meet state standards through town. Upstream of town, where it's undeveloped, up on the national forest, we have healthy bug populations. But within the town of Vail, we've seen pretty steady improvements in surveys of bug populations over the last decade, but they have yet to reach the standard set by CDPHE, which is our goal to try to get back to that
Okay.
standard.
And when do you think that if things keep going the way that they're going, when do you think you guys will obtain that?
Well, our goal is quite specific to achieve passing scores by 2029. Um, so that's the mandate I've been given by the town council. I have to admit, I think it's going to be a real challenge to get there, but we're going to do everything we can. I think we're planning to install more stormwater filtration systems in the next couple of years that could be a good leap forward. We've got plans to make some changes and modifications, major in-stream projects on the Vail Golf Club stretch of Gore Creek that could have some real positive impacts. This project we're talking about at the Vail Nature Center could be a big benefit, but I think getting people to getting widespread adoption of low impact landscaping practices is going to be key to our success.
So it's really kind of predicated off of getting everybody on the same side.
Getting the word out to the community that there are alternatives to foliar applied pesticides in most cases, that other broadcast chemical applications like fertilizers, like weed and feed applications that people put on their lawns do have negative impacts on non-target species like the ones that live in the creek, and trying to encourage people to think about Colorado scaping their landscape, maybe move away from the vast sea of Kentucky bluegrass, turfgrass that needs a lot of water and a lot of chemicals to thrive at 8,150 feet above sea level in a pretty arid environment. And think more about the plants that we all love to enjoy when we're out here in the mountains, the columbine and lupin and larkspur and native grasses and trees and shrubs that you know, in part are what have brought a lot of us to come live in the mountains.
Yeah, I think just the landscaping industry as a whole has just become so much of a production that people forget about native plants. They forget that you don't have to have all these other pretty plants and flowers because we already have them here and you can incorporate them. So I think that's definitely something that people have lost sight of, is just how well you can do with native plants and just how much better they are.
Yeah, I mean they're beautiful. I try to landscape my yard with native vegetation, and I really enjoy how it looks. And I will say I think that the community and the landscape companies are moving in the right direction. I think a year like this one, with such visibly low snowpack and low water supply, has really gotten people's attention as well, and made people realize that it may not be sustainable to maintain such thirsty landscaping in this new climate normal that we're moving into. I don't necessarily think we're going to see winter after winter like this one, but I would be very surprised if we don't see more winters like this one in our lifetime. So I think people are beginning to realize that they may need to rethink the way they landscape, um, to use less water just to achieve the aesthetics that they desire.
Yeah, there's just many other ways. And I think, again, it's just the awareness, it's the education. People just need to know that it's an option. And, it's hard to know the other things that are options when we kind of just engage in the things that are just presented to us. So yeah, no, I think the outreach, the advocacy, the getting the people on board with everything is, like you said, critical to it all. I did want to ask you, we talked about the bugs in Gore Creek. I'm curious about the fish in Gore Creek. Are they, because I know it's gold medal waters, which I mean you can fish for all four species of trout. And it also means a couple of other things. I think it's you can catch a lot of those trout within a certain amount of space or area in that creek as well.
Yeah, so the downstream 4 miles, the lowest downstream 4 miles of Gore Creek is a gold medal brown trout fishery. So that's a very prescriptive standard set by Colorado Parks and Wildlife. And I don't know if I could quote it off the top of my head, but it has to do with the total number of fish per mile and the size of those fish. So what that means is there are a lot of trout and there are a lot of big trout in that stretch of Gore Creek. There are some specific angling restrictions in that area. So you can't use bait, only artificial flies and lures. And the bag limit for fish is less than the standard statewide bag limit. You can only keep 2 fish per day, and they have to be over 16 inches. But I think most people who fish Gore Creek are doing catch and release angling out there. And you mentioned as well that Gore Creek offers what anglers call the Colorado Grand Slam, which is the opportunity to catch 4 species of trout on a single body of water in a single day. So we have healthy populations of brown trout, like I mentioned, rainbow trout, brook trout, and native cutthroat trout in Gore Creek. Um,
Okay.
and maintaining that really high quality fishery is part of the motivation for restoring these bug populations. Like I said, the fish depend on these insects as their food source. So that's one of the reasons that we want to try to make sure that we have a healthy foundation to that aquatic ecosystem.
So it's bugs first, then fish.
Yeah, well, the fish are doing well. We still meet gold medal standards in that downstream portion, and throughout the creek, there's great fishing, and there are tons of fishing opportunities on Town of Vail property along much of the length of the creek. There's private property out in East Vail, but much of the creek from West Vail through Main Vail up to the golf course is fishable and open to the public. And it's still really, really good fishing. So somehow the fish are hanging on. They're eating some of those smaller, more pollution tolerant bugs, even though the big juicy stoneflies and caddisflies may not be as prevalent as they were. They're still getting by on midges and cranefly larvae and mosquito larvae and things like that. And as we recover those more pollution sensitive bug species, we can only expect the fish populations to improve even
Yeah.
further.
And that's not the only thing that happens on Gore Creek. There's recreation, there's rafting, you've got the GoPro games, there are outfitters that run trips through there. So it's more than just fishing and, kind of just enjoying that the Gore services.
Yeah, I mean, we talked earlier about how much this community values this creek and really wants to see it restored to what most of us in the community think it should be, which is a healthy, free-flowing, snowmelt-driven trout stream. And part of the reason people value it so much is because they enjoy it in so many different ways. Like you said, that includes class 3 and 4 whitewater kayaking and rafting and paddleboarding. Later in the summer, you see a lot of people in inner tubes who may not be serious technical whitewater folks, but still really enjoy floating down and getting their feet wet on a hot summer day. As I mentioned, the angling opportunities are world class. But people also just enjoy walking along it. The Vail Nature Center is not far from town. That's where this project we've been discussing is going to take place. It's just, a quarter mile probably from Vail Village, but you're in this stand of mature spruce fir and pine, and you feel like you're really far away from it all. So the opportunities for wildlife viewing and for just enjoying kind of a serene moment by the creek, are really important to this community as well.
Yeah, I remember when we came in August for the NRD meeting. We got some bikes and we rode down that, what is that, the Gore Creek Trail? Is that along the golf course?
Yeah,
So
the
we
Gore Valley Trail is what it's
Gore
called.
Valley Trail. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we rode that. I mean, it was beautiful, and I mean, we even saw a bear on the creek on the bank there.
Yeah,
So that was neat.
it's not unusual. That's a part of our department's outreach as well, is reminding people that you have to have bear resistant trash containers in Vail because we do live in bear country and they were here first, and we got to respect them and protect them by not attracting them with things like bird feeders and unprotected trash containers. But yeah, I mean the wildlife that you can see in Vail and along the creek, goes from, like I said, the smallest bugs, and it'll blow your mind when you turn over a rock in one of these mountain streams, uh, how much life is clinging to the bottom of that rock. Little tiny bugs, smaller than a fingernail clipping, all the way up to black bears and moose. I've seen moose right along that trail you're talking about as well. We have, a uh, really healthy population of bighorn sheep out in East Vail, elk and deer. It's eagles and osprey. It's a cool place to be able to still see that much wildlife close to a pretty developed town like Vail.
Yeah, you guys are right in the heart of it. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought I remember seeing signs about there being like some endangered toad or something on the creek. Is that right?
Yeah, the boreal toad is endangered in the state of Colorado. It's not federally endangered, but it's a state listed species. And we do have some breeding populations of boreal toad in East Vail as well. If you know right where to look, you'll see them at the right time of year. But I mean, they're such a cool species that goes and buries themselves in the mud up in the mountains to hibernate over the winter and
Wow.
emerges and crawls out down to the beaver ponds and things to mate in May and June and lay their eggs and start the cycle again. So, that's another reason for us to really work hard to make sure that we have clean and healthy waterways here, is we're lucky enough to still have this really sensitive and really unique amphibian living in the wetlands right along Gore Creek as well.
Yeah, yeah, very diverse. Lots going on there. Lots.
Yeah.
It sounds like there's a lot going on just on the bank of the creek as well. Yeah, which is neat, and that kind of leads me into when I was there, I saw these signs that say Project Rewild on the creek. So what is that about?
Yeah, so Project Rewild is a part of our education and outreach campaign to kind of get people to change their mindset about their landscaping, but particularly landscaping in proximity to the creek.
Mhm.
The pattern we saw, and part of what contributed to this decline in bug numbers on Gore Creek, is that people were mowing their stream banks right up to the water's edge, fertilizing grass right up to the water's edge. Um, and I understand why people do that. If people buy a creekfront property, they want to see the water. But this is a message that I already said once before. People need to begin to see the creek as more than water in a channel. It's interdependent with the native vegetation that grows along its banks. So in 2023, we adopted a regulation prohibiting mowing within 10 feet of the stream banks. Um, so this is again where this Restore the Gore campaign and the success of this campaign depends not just on the town of Vail, but on private property owners and property managers as well. The town has planted 26,000 native trees and shrubs along stream banks on town property in the last 10 years. And we're now asking private property owners to join that effort and help us create a contiguous ribbon of riparian habitat, of willows and alders and dogwoods, those water-loving native plants that live along stream banks, that are so crucial to the health of the creek. They stabilize the bank with their roots. Those same roots can filter some of the pollutants we've been talking about in groundwater and runoff water. In warm, dry years like this, they're really important to shade the creek and keep the water cool. And they provide nutrients for the bug species and the fish that we've been talking about. The leaves that they drop are a really important food source for a lot of those aquatic invertebrate species. So the calories that eventually sustain the trout and the birds and the bats and the bears might begin as the leaves that fall off the willows and the alders each fall for those invertebrates to shred up and digest over the course of the winter. Um, so that effort, began in 2023. We've really started outreach and enforcement of that in the last 2 years, and I'm hopeful that that's going to move the needle on these bug populations as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. I didn't know that whole initiative there had to do with kind of involving the private landowners and trying to get them on board with doing some other practices.
Yeah, that's the message. Leaving your stream bank wild is the way to be. a good steward of this creek, or letting your stream bank go wild if it's not already.
Wow, very cool. And this is happening throughout the whole all throughout the whole stretch of Gore Creek and Vail there.
Yeah, any named waterway in Vail, so Gore Creek and its tributaries, mowing is prohibited within 10 feet of their
Okay,
stream.
cool.
Yep.
Yeah, good stuff. I mean, they're all steps in the right direction. But I believe it's really about getting the people on board and having them understand or connect with whatever the issue may be. And that could be through many different ways. But yeah, just getting people on board. And I think that's awesome. I really didn't know just how you guys were doing as much as you are at the Town of Vail, doing as much as you are in terms of getting people trying to adopt new things. I think that's great. And like I said, that's really what we need to see. And I think it's communities like this one that are going to be the ones to start this off, and other people will have to follow what you guys are doing.
Yeah, I mean, we have a hope as a destination for travelers to kind of share our mountain values a little bit. If somebody comes from Houston or Chicago or Mexico City and realizes that you can drink the tap water here and it's better than bottled water, and they go home and rethink how often they're going to use single-use plastic bottles, that's a success for us. And the problems that Gore Creek is facing are not unique to Gore Creek or to Colorado. Stormwater pollution and landscape chemical runoff are impacting waterways, rivers, creeks, and bays, and lakes throughout the United States. So this is a message that translates pretty well to a lot of other places around the country. So if Vail has the drive and the resources and the wherewithal to take this comprehensive approach, really town-wide or ecosystem-wide restoration effort, we would be thrilled if we could be an inspiration for other communities trying to do the same thing.
Yeah, I think this is a good timing for it all too, especially right now. Restored Lands is kind of keeping an eye on pesticide liability shields, which are taking hold on a federal and state level. And it's an interesting topic, but it's and a lot of people don't even know about it. I think that's the most concerning part. But I think that it's a step in the right direction, and I think that as far as pesticide use and toxic chemical use is concerned, I don't think the change comes from the people producing it or the people making the rules or laws around it. I think the change comes from the communities, the people within the neighborhoods that choose to adopt other practices and use other products and things like that. That's where I believe it's gonna change, and that's awesome to see you guys are really trying hard to do that.
Yeah, I mean, landscape chemicals, the pesticides and herbicides and insecticides that go on our food crops and ornamental vegetation they're powerful chemicals, and they have a place. They have a role to play. The state of Colorado has a list of state listed noxious weed species. And I don't think it's enforced very frequently, but technically property owners are required to manage their invasive weeds.
Yeah.
And for small infestations, maybe you can go out there and pull those plants. But for bigger infestations and for certain species like Canada thistle, there really isn't a good method of control other than herbicide. So I'm not someone who's going to stand here and say that you should never use a spray bottle in your landscaping, but we do advocate what's called an integrated pest management approach to managing pests and invasive weeds. And under that approach, chemicals are really the last resort. That the best thing you can do is put a plant in the right place where it's going to thrive. This goes to what we were saying before about uh, relying heavily on native species that are adapted to the environment. Because if the plants are just healthy and happy in the place where they're growing, their own immune systems and their own robust defenses against pests are the best prevention that we can have to those pest infestations. Um, Beyond that, not leaving bare ground where weeds can get established, establishing good native plants to prevent those from getting established. And then there are other tools, like I mentioned, mechanical controls, where you actually go out and, you know, dig up the dandelion or the mullein or whatever plant you're concerned about by hand. There are also biological controls. The classic example of that is releasing ladybug larvae to control aphids, but there
Mm.
are some really interesting ones available from the Colorado Department of Agriculture Palisade Insectary. If you want to go down a rabbit hole or go on a really cool tour of a really cool facility when you're going down to get some Palisade peaches late this summer, check out the Palisade Insectary. They raise bugs that control a number of different invasive plants from tamarisk, which is also known as salt cedar. It's an invasive shrubby tree species, to Dalmatian toadflax. They produce a rust fungus that can help control thistles. It's really cool, the science that they're doing out there, and much less potential for harm than some of these broadcast chemical applications that unfortunately too often are the first solution people reach for without considering some of the lower impact options.
Well, I think that's a part of the awareness thing. People just aren't aware. They engage with what's presented to them, and that's pesticides. And the more people can become aware of these other things, the better. And I think that's awesome. They've got a whole facility over there where they have bugs. They You said they grow, or they raise them. Is that what you said?
Yeah, they both vet these pathogens. Mostly they're insects. Like I said, there's some of them are things like a rust fungus that helps control thistle infestations. So they go through a long, like decade plus process of making sure that these insects or fungi are safe to release in the environment and will not become invasive themselves
Hmm.
before they make these things available to the public. But once they've been thoroughly vetted, they have a request a bug program. So you or I could order the Dalmatian toadflax weevil from them, and they would send us a little cardboard box full of these weevils to release on an infestation of Dalmatian toadflax on our property. Might be a really cool podcast episode for you in the future to go talk with these guys. The work they do is really fascinating.
Yeah, that stuff is awesome. I mean, I hear about that and I'm like, why isn't that all we use? You know what I mean? Like, you think thousands of years ago they were spraying toxins on stuff? I don't think so. So no, that's awesome. At some point, I'll definitely check that out. I think this could kind of lead us into, sort of talking about back to the pesticides and how and kind of to the restoration project itself. I sort of want to talk about the golf course first before, because I know that's like right at the head of where the project is sort of going to begin. And from what I understand, when we had the meeting in August, uh, it was interesting to learn that originally that stretch of Gore Creek where the golf course was originally switchbacks. And when they constructed I-70, they had to dig all that up and they just created one large deep channel. And that right there is a big reason for a lot of issues that have been seen downstream. And a lot of those issues are relating to pesticide use.
Yeah, so what you're talking about is another problem that is not unique to Vail. This is
Okay.
really common in Colorado that we build our roadways and our railroads in the bottom of a river valley, right? Because we have there that's where the flat land is. That's the best place to build a roadway or a thoroughfare or a railroad. But one of the unintended consequences of that is that it constrains the natural hydrology of our waterways. A healthy natural creek is meandering, and those meanders create habitat and deep pools for fish. The bends help slow the flow during runoff. Our snowmelt driven streams are incredibly dynamic. A creek like Gore Creek can see 60% of the total volume of water that goes through it in a year during 6 or 8 weeks during snowmelt and spring runoff.
Wow.
So, this creek will go from less than 10 cubic feet per second in the winter to 1,000 cubic feet per second
Wow.
during peak runoff, or even higher. So you think about what that means for the animals that live in the stream, the fish and the bugs, how well adapted they must be to this variation. But that water also has a lot of power. It carries a lot of sediment. It reshapes the stream channel. And a natural stream channel has the opportunity to do that. It's got real estate on either side of its banks that it can inundate and flood and meander through and erode and change. Um, but many creeks in Colorado, and Gore Creek is certainly one of them, have lost that opportunity. They've been constrained by the human development along their banks. So if you could, go Google Earth or look up some aerial imagery, Town of Vail even has an option, maps.vail.gov. You can look at the golf course section of Gore Creek and see that it is just arrow straight because it's been smushed between the interstate, the frontage road, and the golf course. And this is one of those things that when this community developed in the middle or late 20th century, um, people didn't know to be concerned about the impacts that making those changes would have on the ecosystem. So we've just finished a big stakeholder process, a huge community-wide effort, working with the golf club managers, working with hydrologists from outside firms and aquatic biologists to develop a plan and a set of projects to try to restore some of that natural hydrology in the stretch of the creek that runs through the golf course. So that'll involve projects like this one at the Vail Nature Center, where we're getting heavy equipment in the creek and moving rocks around and shaping the channel to create habitat and more natural hydraulics. But it's also taking a comprehensive look at how the golf course is managed, where we can create more riparian buffer and move fairways and greens and turf grass further away from the creek, how we're going to manage trees on the golf course, how we're going to manage the golf course ponds. Um, and whether there are opportunities for us to reassess how we use chemicals to maintain the golf course as well. So, like I said, I think this is the town doing what we're asking the community to do as well, looking at our own property and thinking about where we can restore native vegetation and reduce chemical and water intensive ornamental vegetation like turf grass. Much like chemicals, turf grass has its place. I mean, if you have dogs or you have kids and you want a place for them to run around, turf grass may have a place in your landscape, but I would encourage people not to make it the default entire coverage of your landscaping.
Mhm.
Do you really need property to property line of irrigated and fertilized turf grass, or are there opportunities to incorporate some native plant gardens, some pollinator gardens, a vegetable garden? And yeah, if you want a place for your kids to play, keep some turf grass for that, but don't make it the default entirety of your landscape.
Sure. Well, I think it's great, and I think it's smart that the town of Vail is also doing what they're asking the community to do. It's almost as like a model. I think that's great, especially at the golf course, because golf courses, as you know, they use a lot of chemicals. But I did want to ask you because I remember you saying something about the golf course, how it took a lot of convincing about maybe the people that have been there for a while to do things a different way. Was that about the golf course?
I mean, change always is hard for some people. I think it's hard for all of us to some extent. The golf course managers you know, were actually the ones who approached me about starting this plan to make some changes on the golf course. Some of the regular golfers, I think, had concerns about interruptions to play. They value this recreational resource that the town has. It's part of what they love about
Sure.
summer in Vail. And it's a beautiful golf course. You're out there driving balls with the toothy, ideally snow-capped peaks of the Gore Range downrange from you. The creek runs through the golf course. So I think for a lot of people, it's a peaceful place to get away from it all. And they were afraid that what we were proposing to do, the changes might impact how they enjoy that resource. So it was just an effort to educate people about what the plan was, what its purpose was, how it was going to be implemented, that this wasn't going to, shut down the entire golf course while work was going on. So I think the community has largely come around to support it. They're certainly supportive of the goals of it. Um, and we just need to help people understand, and this is true of the Nature Center project too, that there's going to be short-term disturbance for long-term benefit. So hopefully most people can get behind that.
Yeah, I think they could. And again, I think once more people understand and are aware of, the bigger picture, I think that's key to a lot of it. So just downstream from this this deep straight channel here, that's where the project this restoration project is going to begin, correct? And that's going to be that's not so the damage was about a mile and a half, but the restoration project is not a mile and a half. It's what, 600 yards, was it?
Yeah, yeah, it's about 600 yards, and it is just upstream of where the snowmaking spill entered Gore Creek. So not really in the impacted reach, but certainly in the reach where that population of bugs and fish live. So that was part of the goal, was to be close to where the original incident occurred and restore some of the resources that were impacted by that incident. It is also just downstream of this really straight reach that I described on the golf course and is really impacted by that. So, like I said, a straight, narrow, steep section of stream carries a lot of energy during runoff, and that means it carries a lot of sediment and rock material. And what we've found is the reach where our project is going to occur this fall was a depositional zone for many decades downstream of that fast-moving reach. So anywhere that there were pools in that section, deeper water, they would get filled in by gravel and rocks and cobble. And we now have a very homogeneous, very shallow and wide stretch of creek there, which is not good fish or good bug habitat. But it's such a great opportunity because the riparian vegetation, the forest around it is super healthy. There isn't a lot of pollution coming in directly to that portion of creek, and there's good vegetation on the stream banks. So if we can get in there and reestablish a deep channel and some deep pools, make some changes to the low flow channel and to the high flow regime that will help move sediment through this reach. We have a lot of opportunity to really improve the habitat for aquatic insects and fish through that section. So it's really really ripe for a project like this.
And this here, this is going to be done, like you said, I think it's going to start in August 2026. How long is it going to take to completely finish this?
I think we'll be completely done, like everything restored and replanted in the summer of 2027. But the major work, the bank excavation and moving of material in the creek, needs to happen within 8 weeks there, from August 1st to the end of September. We need to be out of the stream in October for brown trout spawning. That's
Mm.
a requirement of Colorado Parks and Wildlife.
So you guys, you guys have a window where this needs to get done if we were to do it this year.
Yeah, so usually the window is kind of between uh, high flow and the beginning of brown trout spawning. So a silver lining of our very dry winter might be that we won't be contending with really high stream flows,
Yeah.
certainly by August 1st. And it might make it a little bit safer and a little more efficient for our equipment operators who are working in the creek.
Well, I think I'm stoked to see, see it all come together and come to fruition. The big thing for me, and this was my very first question when I first got into this, is it's been 5 years since this spill happened. And it's been even longer. And with the settlement, that's what allowed this to happen. But it's been 5 years since that happened. Why has it taken so long?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, some of it is these things move at the speed of government. I didn't have a lot of insight into what the settlement process was like at the state level, so I can't really speak to that. Um, Man, do I even remember off the top of my head? I think we found out in late 2024 that a settlement had been reached. It then took a little bit of time for us to write some grants and try to use that money as matching funds to really increase our impact, our positive impact with the settlement dollars. There was some contracting process between the state and Trout Unlimited to, hand off that money to the nonprofit, to Eagle Valley Trout Unlimited. And then we have to do a lot of design of this project. And I think this is a good thing. There's a lot of state, federal, and local oversight of projects that move rocks in the creek. Um, the Army Corps of Engineers wants to review this stuff. FEMA wants to review this stuff. And then our local floodplain administrator also has to vet this project. That's to make sure that one property owner doesn't come in and bulldoze a bunch of rock into the creek and cause flooding for a downstream neighbor. Or things, that were allowed to happen when the golf course was developed, like this narrowing of the creek that has all these unintended ecological impacts and hydrological impacts, wouldn't be allowed today. There's oversight of that stuff so that people can't do that kind of cavalier, unintended harm to the form of a natural waterway. So the permitting process and design process, you know, also occupies at least a year of planning and preparation.
Yeah, I guess it's just nothing happens overnight.
No, you have to be patient about this stuff, and for me, this is a career long, or at least a good chunk of my career will be dedicated to restoring Gore Creek, and I can't think of a better way to spend it.
Yeah, no, totally. I think that's awesome. I think you guys are doing great work. It's really awesome to see and hear just how much that the town of Vail is actually doing. I think it's one thing to tell people that they need to figure out or, do things a better way, but it's another thing to be that leader and that model, that role model for them to follow. And I think you guys are doing just that, which is great.
Thanks for saying so, Henry.
Yeah, totally. So to recap here, as far as the restoration project is concerned, this 600-yard few month or couple month project is going to be is it deepening the river a little bit?
Yeah, so what we have right now, like I said, is a wide and shallow channel. And within that channel, we want to create a deeper, kind of incised, V-shaped, low flow channel. So, like I said, a creek like Gore Creek is really dynamic. We see these 1,000 CFS flows, but most of the time it's relatively low water. So we want there to be viable habitat for fish and bugs, even when the water is low, and giving them deep pools where an osprey or an eagle cannot swoop down and grab them out of the water so easily. Deep pools where they have cold water during a hot summer day when the water is low. Um, and mixed in with riffles, the kind of mini rapids, I guess, of faster moving water through rocks. That's really where the bug populations thrive, is in that moving water where they have rocks to cling to. So you need this diversity of habitat, and that's what we're going to try to create. Um, right now, like I said, it's very homogeneous. Everything's the same, and that is not conducive to a healthy ecosystem. You need some variety. And this is true of almost any ecosystem, but it's certainly true of a stream ecosystem, that you need a variety of habitats to facilitate the different life phases of the aquatic insects and animals that we would like to see thriving in this creek.
So with everything that's being done, that has been done so far, and what's to come in the future, what is your outlook? 5, 10 years down the road, once this project's done, once you guys do more work around the golf course, and you just have more remediation or restoration efforts. What's the outlook? How do you think it's going to all pan out in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, I hope and I think it's already underway. I hope it's a cultural change in Vail, and I would love to see this across the state of Colorado, that people's mindset about what beautiful landscaping looks like shifts from, the kind of cliche, perfectly mowed green grass without a single clover or dandelion in it behind a white picket fence to something that better reflects our Colorado mountain ecosystems and blends with the natural ecosystem that we have out here. As far as, specific to town projects, we're trying to achieve state standards for bug numbers in this creek in 3 years. So I would love to see us get there by 2029. But the work's not going to end when we do achieve those numbers. There's going to be um, a need to continue to steward this ecosystem and make sure that we don't backslide on the gains that we've made. So things like the golf course or the golf club enhancement plan is going to be a multi-year implementation. We're probably, hopefully, going to begin our first project there in 2027. I think that'll be a 5 or 8 year implementation of, one project a year over the better part of a decade to get the goals of that plan achieved. So this project at the Nature Center is our first really big, ambitious in-stream habitat restoration project. I'm hoping we can show this to be a successful model for some of those other projects that we hope to undertake on the golf course reach and elsewhere, and maybe even do some learning that could inform smaller scale projects for private property owners along the creek who might be motivated to follow our lead.
Okay. Well, I like what you said there. The cultural change. I think this is a cultural change. I think that the people want something different. They want something better, and I think, like I was saying earlier, that's going to come from the people. It's going to come from the local neighborhoods, and yeah, I think it is a cultural change too. So I think people like us really have that going for us because they're the ones that we need to help, and they are on their way to doing that. They just need to, maybe see some more of the bigger picture, or gain a larger, bigger awareness. But I do think it's a cultural change too. So I think in 10 years, as it relates to, just our society's connection with the environment, I think it's going to go both ways, but ultimately I think it's going to be better. I think it's going to be, if you choose to want to be a part of it, you can, but if you choose not to, you don't have to be either. But I do think it's a cultural change, and I think the people that are going to be making the changes are the ones that actually really want to have a hand in having a better future, having a better tomorrow. So that's going to make it that much more better, that much more potent when these people do kind of switch sides, if you will.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine anyone not wanting a better future or more sustainable future. I think people just need to see how it's done. They need to see what a beautiful native landscape can look like. I think we need, and they're already doing it. The landscape contractors around here are learning how to implement those kind of landscape projects and create beautiful native landscapes around the homes and the hotels in Vail. And they're learning as they go. So the more people see it, the more people will be willing to adopt it.
Yeah, and it might even get to the point where it's no longer trendy to have, a yard full of just green grass that's having to be treated with fertilizer. So that's something else too. But I do think it's going in the right direction, and it's exciting to see. I really think it's exciting to see the people start to realize that the way that we've been doing it might not really be the best way. So to see that the people want to have a hand, and instead of just, having it done for them, I think that's really exciting for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. I agree. I think the trend is moving in the right direction.
Totally, totally. Well, before we wrap up here, I wanted to ask you if there was any kind of like updates or news you wanted to give as of, what is it, April? Wow, April now, 2026, as it relates to whether it be Gore Creek or just kind of anything that you wanted to maybe share.
No, we've talked about most of the big projects we've got going on Gore Creek. I mean, I'd encourage people to come up and visit Vail and see some of these spots for themselves. Reach out to us if you're, in a community where you'd like to do something similar to what we're trying to do here. We'd be happy to be a resource. Maybe I'll take this opportunity to just encourage people to be responsible stewards of our ecosystems when they're out recreating in the mountains this summer. I think we can expect it to be a particularly dry year. A lot of people around here are concerned about the wildfire risk. And, some climate experts I talked to yesterday had some more positive outlooks for the monsoon rains this summer that might materialize and help. I don't think we could say make up for the lack of snowpack, but the way I look at this is a lot of fires in Colorado are started by people. And what that means is people have the power to prevent those fires from being started. So that's really what I'm getting across right now is obey fire restrictions. If you can't have a campfire, there's a good reason that that is in place. If you're smoking cigarettes or driving a UTV, make sure you're not flicking those cigarettes into dead grass or parking, ATVs or trucks or Jeeps with hot motors and in tall, dry, dead grass. We all, collectively, the community in Colorado are going to need to be extra cautious this year about potential sources of ignition. And if we all do that, we can avoid the most devastating wildfires. So hopefully people are aware of it this year and act accordingly.
Yeah, sometimes it's just the smallest thing that can make all the difference when it comes to stuff like that.
Yep, just a little bit of prevention.
Yeah. So be smart out there this season.
Yep, that's the message.
Right on. All right, Pete. Well, I sure appreciate you coming on today, man. I'm hoping to get this out here by Earth Day, so I'll definitely keep you posted on that. But I sure appreciate you. And I look forward to seeing kind of just how everything plays out with the restoration and even the bigger picture with, the advocacy and getting the community on board with maybe changing some things on how they kind of practice, owning property on the watershed.
Yeah, absolutely, Henry. I really appreciate the opportunity. It was great seeing you and talking to you, and I'm sure we'll chat again soon.
All right, Pete. Well, sounds good. Thanks so much, man. I will keep in touch with you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Have a good afternoon.
You too. See ya.
Thank you for watching the Restored Lands podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, catch our others on YouTube or Spotify. If you're new to Restored Lands work around Gore Creek, check out our website, www.restoredlandsnonprofit.com/Vail Gore Creek Petition.